Well, welcome back. And we are here today now to present to you our last panel for the day, who will be discussing the cash flow management in FM. Now, if there's one thing that COVID 19 has taught us, and is that a single event can trigger a cascade of risks affecting all aspects of entity operation. So, today's panel will talk about the way one can manage that cash flow inside. So before we get into the discussion, I would like to introduce you to the panel, starting with Mr. Badr Yusuf Salmin, the Facilities Management Director of UFM Company from Kuwait. We also have with us Mr. Indika Vijayratne, the Finance Executive Director of Ijada. And we also have Mr. Dilip Katwani, the board member of MEFMA and the Chief Executive Officer of Reliance FM. And the panel is being moderated by Ms. Sara Mumtaz, who is an FM industry expert and a consultant and an advisor. So viewers, please do note that the Q&A will be held in the last 10 minutes of the discussion. And we do have a networking lounge where you can take the discussion out there post the session. So over to you, Ms. Sara.
Thank you very much, Mega. Assalamu alaikum. Hello and a very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to the Facilities Management Day of the Smart Built Environment Forum. As mentioned by Mega, my name is Sara Momtaz, and I'm absolutely delighted and honored to be hosting today's session, all the way from sunny Abu Dhabi, here in the UAE. Again, I would like to warmly welcome you all, whether or not you're from the FM or real estate industry. I'm sure you will thoroughly enjoy today's events, particularly this session. We have a fantastic lineup of panelists sharing their expertise and knowledge on cash flow management topics, and we'll be talking about how it's relevant pre and post the COVID-19 pandemic, and basically how it'll shape the future of FM. We welcome you, the audience, to interact with our panelists, as Mega has mentioned, by sending through your questions or comments via the chat box option, and we will, of course, try and answer as many of those as we can, depending on how much time we have. You may even find some of the panelists responding to you in real time as we're going through the actual session. So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome each of my guests. So hello to Badr, Indika and Dilip. It's wonderful to have you all join me in today's session. As FM professionals, a healthy cash flow is a huge factor in providing the best service delivery standards. And as such, I'd like to encompass this topic around three main discussion points. So let's get straight into it with the first one. So the first discussion point really is the fundamentals, if you like. Where do the issues of cash flow come from? So if I can start with Badr and get his viewpoint, please.
Yeah, so thank you for this introduction, and welcome to all our audience. When we talk about the cash flow during the pandemic, it is mainly we are talking about a negative or the shortage of the cash flow, which make most of the businesses and especially the FM sector suffering during that period. But if we will say from where the issue started, actually the issue started by not being prepared. Cash flow is part of the financial controls of any organization. And the problem with many, especially the small organizations, that part is left unmonitored for long period of time because it was moving smoothly and there was no hiccup. So it's like when you have your building running smoothly and you don't have an emergency plan in a place, although that the emergency plans you will going to execute it only when there is an emergency, but you cannot operate a building without it. That is the same situation which has happened with the cash flow. People, because they haven't had the close monitoring and they didn't have the plans to deal with the cash deficit on their cash flows, that's where the problems came on. And also because they haven't had past experience with that issue, they were struggling through the emergency of the lack of the cash flow, trying to find solution around it. But basically, it's like when you are inside the emergency, your choices are limited because you haven't done your preparation. And we can go through what we could do during the normal time to be able to manage our cash flow during the difficult time. So if that can cover the point from where the issue came on. But also to add with that, with the last comments, it is mainly that everybody got affected with their revenues. So everybody gets scared, and then whatever cash was on their hand, they want to keep it within their premises and not to give it to their subcontractors or their suppliers, because they don't have a visibility how long that will going to go, and also because they don't have any guarantees when the cash in will be coming from their clients. So that chaos in the situation, with not clear how the situation will going to end up, created a big mess with it at the beginning. Maybe now things become easier and more smoother, and some of it have been resolved, but that is mainly how the issue began, and why every or many organizations get affected by the cash flow issues.
Yeah, some good points there, Bader. I mean, you mentioned obviously to do the revenue is gonna have a huge impact. From your perspective, what has been the biggest cash flow challenge that you faced during these pressing times?
For us as an organization, as UFM, we haven't had difficulties in there. It is because of the financial stability of the organization and the group. So we haven't had that difficulties with the things, but we have seen how our clients and our subcontractors were struggling during that period. Some of them have an immediate hit with it, and some of them, they know that we're not going to recover of it till the end of the year, and maybe till the end, mid of the next year, and some of them it might take them longer than that. Our organization, because as I said, of the financial stability, we have not been hit by this issue, and we manage it because of the control measures within the organization and the stability. But we have to help our the suppliers and our subcontractors with the issue, because also their survival during that period, it is a mandate to us. I don't want to survive alone, and by the end of the issue, I will find myself alone, and then I have to go and look for a new subcontractors or suppliers. So we've been worried about the people working with us and trying to keep the whole chain of business working during that period. That was the main challenge in there.
Very interesting. We'll come into a little bit of supply chain management throughout the session. Thank you very much, Bader. Can I bring Indika into the conversation and get his thoughts on it, please?
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome the team for this session this evening. And let me begin with where the Bader stopped at the end. I think that was a very statement that Bader made about the financial stability. And in October 2020, when Mohammed Al-Abbar was speaking to the annual investors meeting, the chairman of the MR Properties, and he said few points. He said that the companies that were built carefully, have reserves, manage their debt very well, and have acquired the best talent will have a better chance to cope with the crisis. I think this is exactly what Bader said, and this is the reality. And if the companies are built on strong fundamentals, and then the survival during these type of difficult times is not a problem. But going back to the initial point which Bader again mentioned at the very early stage, this is unexpected, unplanned. And let me add a few financial insights to the point that Bader shared with us in terms of how this cash flow gap arises. It's very simple mismatch between the inflows and outflows. We talk about in usual terms. Where are the cash inflows coming from, and then what that cash is used for the outflows? How does it happen in a business like in FM industry specifically? And our manpower, we are a manpower heavy business, especially in Middle East, and the manpower needs to be paid at the end of the month, no matter whether the cash comes in or whether we have supplier commitments. how much of that manpower as a percentage of overall cost of the company, it really a concern. And also, Badar also touched upon on this point, the customer credit days versus supplier credit days. And customers want more credit days to make the payments. At the same time, suppliers wants to pay immediately because we have a kind of the challenging situation to balance these two, and then that results in a cash flow because we have to balance the demand from the suppliers for the payment. At the same time, the customers who are asking for extended credits because they also go through the same situation as we are. And specifically the logistic issues. And as we have seen it in the first 3 months of pandemic, and the mobilization challenge, the transportation challenge, and getting things, even to get a check signed in a situation which was a major challenge that the companies faced. And adding to this, the panic attacks. I think that's something that we should also talk about. How I want to link it to Badar is that because we talk about poor planning, when we don't plan, when we are not setting for a scenario, when we are not ready to accept such scenarios, then there is panic actions, and everybody is trying to preserve as much as possible, and that causes a gap in the market as well as in the company as well. And the one key point, Sarah, is the critical suppliers. And sometimes the opportunities for the critical suppliers to demand for cash, upfront payments, no credit payments, and all of these are adding together in a critical situation, and that causes the cash flow crisis. And if it is not ready with this type of scenario planning, and then the companies get into a short-term cash crunch, and that's where the cash flow gap comes in this type of pandemic situations.
It's very good points. I'm, just listening to what you've been saying, and if I kind of combine everything that you've said, do you think that FM firms and FM managers in this region now have a better understanding of the significance of cash flow management?
I think it's a balance, and there are some, but there are not some as well, because it all goes with experience. We all talk about learning through experience and learning through mistakes, and that learning cycle. And you may recollect in 2008 when the financial crisis hit the property industry, right? And then that lasts for 3-4 years, and only one segment was mostly impacted, which is property, real estate, plus the retail to some extent. Whereas this crisis went through all the sectors of the market. And but were the managers well set to accept that challenges? I doubt. And I would say it's 80-20. 80% were not ready. Maybe 20% were ready because they would have had this solid financial planning throughout their as the DNA in their business. I think many of the managers were not ready. But going to that, there was a very good learning, very quick learning. Everyone has now understood what does it mean, and everyone is ready to accept that, and everyone is in a much better knowledge pool about how to manage such situation. I think that's the 6 months of experience has brought all managers into a much better understanding as to what the cash flow is, how to manage it.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because I mean, especially now, considering all the things that have happened, and us as an industry, we have to always be as agile as possible and ready to provide solutions, because that's basically the fundamentals of what we do. Thank you very much, Indika. Let's bring Dilip into the conversation. Quite interested to hear your thoughts.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me for the session. And, and although I'm part of the management of the company, but the basic problem I see in cash flow crisis is a systemic problem within the company. I personally feel very happy to hear Badar's and Indika's point, which are pretty technical. I want to get into the design issue of companies going through cash flow. Design problem with companies having cash flow issues comes in from the top, where the CEO or the board is more married to the top line of the company rather than the bottom line in cash flow. I think that's the root cause of most companies having cash issues. If your CEO or MD doesn't understand the element of money in the bank, and not just money in the bank reserve. I call it MIB and MIBR. Till that time, your company will be always tight on cash. One of the key things to keep in mind is from a management perspective that you should, as CEOs and MDs, you should be able to create a culture of not just revenue, but bottom line and cash flow management. That's one important one to do. And second, specific to the FM companies and FM, I've seen it in Asia, I've seen it in Europe, and seen it now in the Middle East. I see one of the key challenges to cash flow management is not spending enough of time on finalizing the contract. If your business development person is ready to finalize this contract, bothered about what are the payment terms. Operations is not bothered about what's the payment terms. Finally, it's the contract is signed without speaking enough about what the payment terms are going to be. So that element is critical. That when you're finalizing contract, maybe for large contracts, your financial controller should be part of those contract. Yeah, that's an important point to keep the design elements proper. And the third element is that, and I have not heard of companies doing this. We talk about health and safety policy. We talk about operations policy. We talk about business development strategy. Nobody talks about election policy. I think it should be a documented process within your manuals within the company. If you define stakeholders within the company, like for example, it's the responsibility of the at the top of the management to create a culture of making sure that when you're delivering work, you need to make sure the money comes in on time. So I think that's one of the key things to keep in mind, that there should be a culture created by companies that if we are delivering work on time, the money has to be coming in on time. And each stakeholder within the loop of things, within that workflow, whether it's operations or BD or finance, or everybody should be sensitive that finally I've delivered work, I need my money.
No, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. In an ideal world, that would be the perfect scenario. I think a lot of the challenges we have here, I'm not sure what all companies do in terms of their business development, but I would assume that they would have some sort of contingency there. They would incorporate some of those costs into a mobilization kind of fee, or they would have some kind of cost where they can at least kind of compensate if something like this does happen. I think the challenge we have, Dilip, here is that you sign these agreements in good faith, and there is a payment term. But if the company then doesn't pay, what do you do? This is the issue. Whereas in some parts of the world, it might be very easy to kind of take up a legal case. It's not that straightforward here. And I think this is maybe where some of the challenges fall through. But I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're absolutely right. The fundamentals of what you've said make absolute sense, and I couldn't agree with you more. I just want to ask you, in terms of expectations, from a client's perspective, do you think that they have unrealistic expectations of FM companies' cash flow during these kind of circumstances?
Yeah, just to answer your previous question, Sarah, what you mentioned is that, yes, you do sign contracts in good faith, and you do start working in good faith. But finally, what we sometimes fail to realize is that, yes, we feel it's important to maintain the relationship with regards to making sure the client is happy in terms of service we are delivering. But what we don't communicate to the client is that finally we are delivering you service, right? And whether it's the operations manager of the other company or the client, when he's expecting a KPI from you, he should feel himself accountable to get back your KPI as well.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
I think that relationship management on KPIs, while we deal on that level, is important. Yeah, we are making sure that we are contractually abiding by the process, right? You also make sure that you're contractually abiding.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like I said, I couldn't agree with you more, because I think that this is where we have the shortcomings. I've seen it time and time again where FM service providers go above and beyond, you know, what's within the remits of their contract, just purely for the relationship management part of it. But it's a collaboration. It's not just from one side. That both parties have to work together. But you know, do you think that we have clients here at the moment that do have some kind of unrealistic expectations in terms of cash flow management, especially if they're not paying? You know,
Yeah,
to the point that Indica was making, where by paying your staff, you've got expenses to pay. What do we do in that scenario?
See, I mean, in that scenario, like Badr said, that you know, and Indica said that if the companies who manage themselves are process oriented, who manage their top to bottom process well, they have kept reserves, right? That's one part. Second part is they have kept in touch with their clients. You know what's happening to the client, yeah. And in case you're not in touch with your client, you just don't know what's going to happen when. So that kind of integration with the client is very critical, yeah. Just to know what's going on and more so now, what's going on in their field of business, yeah. So finally, if they are not getting the money, and if you're not coming to know, you will not get your money, and you need to decide what you need to do. Yeah. So I agree that at this point of time, there have been cash flow issues with most companies. And in our case, you know, culturally, we have created a process where we don't operate on debt and stuff like that. And very few cases have been there which we have managed on a one-to-one basis. But yes, there are cash flow issues in the market. Companies are going bust. So, very important to, and when we go on further, we'll talk about what one has to do to ensure, you know, some micro level suggestions which can help companies to go about collecting money on time.
Yeah. No, very good points. Thank you very much, Dilip, and to all three of you. I'd like to move on to our next discussion point, which is, I mean, we kind of covered it, but we're going to look into a little bit more detail. How can we manage cash flow management during these pressing times? So, you know, what's the best way to manage it? And if I can start with Badr, please.
Yeah, sure. The best way to manage the cash flow during those situations is to be prepared for it. And there are a number of tools and number of ways of handling those issues. Usually we should, to manage the cash flow in the normal situation when the business is not suffering from any symptoms, is to have the continuous monitoring and to do the analysis and to do the optimization, because even during the normal days, still you have to optimize your cash flow. And by referring to optimization, it's avoiding the extended cash shortage. And you have to do a forecasting for your cash flow, because you might have a deficit into certain months or during certain period of the year. But if you are relying on whatever is coming monthly and you just spend whatever you have to spend during that month, that means you are not planning for at least the 12 months ahead. And that's from, we should start with that by having all that planning. But now what we have learned from this pandemic issue, we need to do more than just the planning. We have to run scenarios now. If those sectors get affected, my income will be reduced by certain percentage, knowing that my client will going to have that hit. How that will going to affect my cash flow, and then what are my options to deal with that shortage or deficit in there. For example, one of the issues which help many organizations is getting business line credit, but you cannot get it when you are in the trouble, because everybody is rushing for that. So basically you have to secure those in agreements with your financial providers before you get into the financial trouble. So is all organization being prepared for that, and they had those options in their pockets to use it? And also not to think when you are running into the cash flow problems, not to rely only in getting your money from your clients, because most of the clients, they are not paying you because they don't have that cash, or they will going to pay whatever comes on top of the priority list for them. And the service provider or the FM organization might not be on the top. They have other peoples which they have to pay them first. So what are the other options? And also looking into those. So we should not only just wait for the cash to come. How the FM industry and the FM service providers can help their clients to pass that period and to reduce their cost. Because insisting in getting my whole money without trying to help my client, I'm not going to get it, because the money is not coming to the client. Otherwise, he would have paid me on time with the same amount. So part of it should go into negotiation, monitoring my client's situation. If I know my client will be in deep trouble and he will not going to recover from the hit of the pandemic for the next, let's say, 12 months, will it be wise just to go and continue providing the service for that coming 12 months, knowing that my client might have bigger troubles, not only just with me, with the other suppliers and vendors and stakeholders around his business? So we have to change the way we are thinking. It's not that what I should get by the contract or by the agreement with my client, but I have to find solution for my client to pass that period and for both of us to survive. And by also me surviving, I should pass that benefit to my subcontractors and my subsidiaries, where they can also survive. So yes, we might not all make the same profit, or we might be in little losses, but still we can survive that period. So there are a number of issues which we have, we can look at to solve the cash flow problems, reducing the operation areas that will going to reduce on myself and my clients, trying to find solution for getting credits, delaying some payments, renegotiating with the suppliers. I know some of the suppliers, they are insisting now on getting 50% or the whole full payment before they deliver the services. But if you go and negotiate with them, if they have that items or that stock already in a store, it is better for them to get it out than get it in the store and not getting the business. So if I can do part of the payment, that will going to help them, and also it will going to help me to keep my client running. But if my client is in deep trouble, then it won't help him by me continuing providing the service and hoping he will going to pay me at the end. So we have to be more flexible, more resilient on this area, and to be proactive with our clients and extend our help to them.
Yeah, no, you made some very interesting points, and it kind of touches also upon what Dilip and Indika was always just previously talking about in terms of the communication and managing that relationship. But ultimately, if we're providing a service, we need to get paid for it, because that's the whole purpose of our business model. And you're absolutely right. There has to be some kind of negotiation, understanding on how everybody and all parties together can best get through this difficult time. I wanted to ask you about it in terms of your supply chain. Have you had any major challenges, or has your supply chain been affected during the pandemic?
As I said, because of our financial stability, we were struggling with the logistics and maintaining the sites for our client. And that is where most of our effort went during the, especially the full lockdown period. To be honest, we haven't had that shortage of cash to struggle with. So we haven't had that problem. But our clients, many of them, they had that problem. So many of them, they have delayed our payments, and we have to manage with our reserves and the credits which we have with the, some organization and also within our group. So
Okay.
we haven't had a great hit on that. We were
Alhamdulillah, that's good
focusing
news.
in paying my suppliers and keeping them on the business. And even in sometimes maybe we have paid before the terms of the payments just to help them because we know that others are not paying them. So we are trying just to keep everybody floating within that store.
That's good. That's great to hear. Thank you very much. If I can bring Indika into the conversation, how can we best manage cash flow management during this time?
I think, Sarah, again, the brother gave a very good start and brought a very practical aspect into it, which is talking about the forecast and scenario planning, as well as being partnering with our customers as well as suppliers. I think that was a very, very important point that many players sometimes miss, because they think about themselves and then they tend to ignore that, yes, we are working with the customers in one side and suppliers in another side. I would like to bring a bit of a framework into this. I think that would put some thought into that, and if we can think across these lines when we talk about managing such situations, I think it's very important to build a robust framework. I think that the brother touched upon on that. I think that, and Dilip very clearly mentioned, I really like that statement, being a finance professional, and we should have a collections policy, or these things should talk about different economic situations, right? It should not be always a one policy that applies always. We need to take into account the various economic circumstances, and then that way we need to have a framework in place. That framework should talk about, and these, I'm not talking about very technical things in a company, but within our routines we need to come up with this framework. And one of the key point is that the kind of ring fencing, right? And then ring fencing cash flows for payroll, short-term payments, and then how can we ring fence particular supplier payments relating to a customer collection from that particular project. And in that way, and we have number of ways of doing that, and that's one other way to look into that. And also it's very important, because we, at the end of the day, we talk about cash to cash cycle. What does the cash to cash cycle mean? The cash coming into the organization and then being paid out to the suppliers and then retaining the business. I think most of the time what we see, and Dilip gave a very solid point on that from the CEO or the management point of view, and look at the income statement. And during the financial crisis, this tendency has to be changed. It's the income statement versus the balance sheet. And I think we always talk about this, Dilip, like because income statement, the CEO always want to maintain a higher bottom line, and then also at the same time, we as a management team needs to bring this perspective of balance sheet. How do I maintain cash? How do I maintain my receivable days? And how do I maintain my payables days? I think that's very important, and keep that in mind. And when we talk about balancing this, we also have to look at each action has a reaction as well. And if we are so conservative in our managing our cash and then push our supplier payments, and then that will have a situation of not being able to be partnered with them. That's a balance that we need to maintain. And we always say this in a financial crisis, and then usually the finance is kind of not that popular in organizations. And but we all in this time, but we always say that, Sarah asked this question, are managers ready? I think they are ready now. We need to think as CFOs during financial difficulties. We all need to think about as CFOs. When we take decisions, CEO has to step down to CFO, and the project managers have to step up to CFO. And then that way, then we all, I think the first month we struggled. I think after second, third month, as I said earlier, we all started thinking the same manner. And last point I wanted to add to this is that we have to think beyond our walls. That's very important. We have to think out of our box. We have to think what are the ways of minimizing expenses, and I want to bring one important point here, Sarah. We always talk about fixed and variable, and like we all know about this being FM players. And the variable is something that we can always manage as and when the situations change. The fixed is something that's difficult to avoid. And then during the financial difficulties, we should try and convert some of the fixed costs into variable costs. I don't think I have enough time to explain it in more detail.
Great point, actually.
But Dilip,
no, it's a great point. It's a great point, yeah.
When the cost is variable, then it can fluctuate, and then we can manage the cash flows according to the situation. And then when we are stuck with heavy fixed costs, and our resilience of facing crisis situation is something which is very challenging. I think had we had more time, we can talk about this in more detail. I think these are the few aspects that we can put in place, and then that the framework which I talk about, having taken all of this into account, and continuous monitoring. Continuous monitoring is very important. And when you talk about the fixed variable cost, avoid as much as possible, control as much as possible, minimize as much as possible, and that way we can strike a balance between the inflows and outflows, and then we can. The survival is what is very important during difficult times, and I think that will certainly help for the survival, Sarah.
Indika, you must have made a lot of friends in the past few months within your company. Yeah? A lot of your colleagues must have.
I would say 6 months.
6 months. Just remember, just next 6 months, and it will be the same.
Inshallah. No, these are some great points. Actually, I wanted to ask you, to give us some kind of advice in terms of what companies can do to put in a framework, where you pretty much answered it. I like the fact that you mentioned, I think, something that's extremely significant and maybe at some times does go overlooked in terms of trying to change those fixed costs. So, we've heard stories about some of the companies reducing those fixed costs. We've even heard stories about companies that actually, have taken reductions in their salaries. So kind of senior members of the companies to try and encourage, that cash flow to be a little bit more healthier through these times. So fantastic points. Thank you very much for that, Indika. Let's bring Dilip back in and get his insight, please.
Yeah, I mean, great points from Indika. Great points from Indika. Badr, of course, had some points which
he hasn't got a cash flow problem. He's okay, but
yeah, he's fine.
Alhamdulillah.
So, I may disagree with few of his points, which I'll speak to him separately. but I'll come to more practical perspective to and few ideas which has worked with us. I'd like to share that, and I like this term which Indika uses as a framework. That framework is very critical, and as part of that framework, what we are doing is the two key elements which has helped us and probably may help other companies as well, is to have a stakeholder team which is from various departments, okay, and have regular. I mean, we do weekly meetings, so and there are meetings which I head as well, which is part of collection. So there are meetings which the CFO would head and the operations would head, but these are stakeholders who are directly in touch with clients, right? And from there, so right from a kind of cycle of direct stakeholders in touch with the client, to our admin, to collection, to finance, they have regular meetings on a weekly basis to see how the process is going. Yeah, and I would head another meeting on the top with my managers to ensure and see because what happens is the more layers you have in this whole process of getting cash on time, the more the cash gets, the more cash collection gets reduced, to my experience. The key element to cash collection is the direct stakeholders should be involved in that process. The more you make a hierarchy on cash flow, you will absolutely have a problem, I can promise you. So I personally feel that element is critical. Yeah. Second element during COVID times, which I feel helped us do cash flow management, is it's key to be, of course, it's very important to be in touch with your clients. Is that relationship management element is key now. If you don't know your client well, you don't know what he's going through in that process of his business cycle. Yeah. He may promise you that give me 3 months, 6 months. You have to understand his business challenges. Yeah. That relationship management is very critical to understand how he will be able to give you, and if not, at least you need to decide whether to sustain that client. So what is happening today, that clients are facing challenges and they are promising you, right? But till the time you don't get deeper into understanding the relationship, the challenge they are having from their businesses, and for that you need to know them well.
Yeah.
He will not tell you across the table, So the idea is to have that partner relationship, that friendship relationship, that he opens up to tell you that, look, this is where the problem is, And I think that today's, relationship management was always key, but today is most critical than any time. You have
Yeah,
to
100%.
run your businesses.
100%. And also, that also brings into the trust factor. You've got to have that trust relationship with the clients and the transparency, because, Badir touched upon this earlier on. Ultimately, we're all in this together, and we've got to see how we can work together to kind of, make the best out of a bad situation. Dilip, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about service charge. I'll be interested to get your thoughts on that, on this, sorry. Have you seen an impact against the service charge collections that have contributed to cash flow for FM companies?
Yes, service charge, as you know, is part of the, every unit owner is supposed to be paying service charge to ensure the common areas maintenance are done properly. So if you see the cycle from March onward, March to June, service charge was affected because, it was all shut down, and people didn't know how to collect money, how to transfer money. Part of it, yeah, and because people were losing jobs, they were finding reasons to delay service charge payments. Yeah, so that was the scenario from March to June. But I think the regulator has played a great part in this. What I was very impressed about is that the first thing what they did, they understood the challenge of the market, and they let go of penalties on late. Yeah, so that created the trust of the owners within the system, right?
Yeah.
That was done by, I think, April or May or June. Yeah. And then from July or August onwards, the regulator went about saying that if you don't pay, this could be the problem. So the regulator has come up with, from the MOLAC, you can actually go about sending legal letters to people who are not paying money. Now the RDC has also come in, so you can go to RDC to go about taking the service charge case in case the person has not paid up. So the moment this process started, people started paying. Yeah. So I see a big change in the past 3 months. And hats off to Dubai government and regulator on this, that the service charge collection is improved. Yeah. And I know still it may not be perfect, but big improvement in the service.
Yeah.
Yes, there are service providers, FM service providers, which have, there have been delayed payments in there. But I think the way the regulator now getting the system fully together, I don't think from next year, FM companies or service providers working within the scheme of the owners association element will have any cash flow problem, because it's all organized. I mean, the regulation is in place, the legal system is in place, and I would say that the next year collection for this portfolio of real estate would be excellent, and I would actually recommend contractors to work in that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dilip. I also think we've learned a lot from the economic crisis that we had back in sort of 2008 times, especially around service charges. I agree with you. They've come together very quickly to put some kind of fundamentals in place, which has been extremely impressive. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, gents. Let's go on to the third discussion point, if we can. So basically, the question is, with growing cash flow concerns and a higher focus on return on investment in an increasingly competitive space, how can the FM industry and building owners benefit to strive to progress? So we'll start with Badir, if we may, please.
Yeah. Again, it all goes into the same issues which we have cleared before. There are opportunities came with this pandemic situation, where many of the facilities, you don't have to have it at the full capacity. And the FM industry is playing a great role in there, where they can reduce the demand on the areas and the utilized areas within all the facilities and the buildings. And they should work in there, because that will going to help them to reduce their cost and be able to pass that part of that saving to their clients. The client will not going, most of them, they don't have the resources and the knowledge to recommend those things, but it needs little reorganization of the things to make sure that we can reduce certain areas, especially when we are talking about a production space or office space or things like that. We have to come up with those solutions to help the clients. If there is no need, why should that space continuously maintained as it is in full operation? That is not an excuse for the service provider just to invoice the client at the end of the day, knowing that they will not going to be able to pay them because the utilization of the space is not there and they are not good in their business. That part and that element is there. And also managing cash flow, it is not only during difficult times. Many businesses in USA, there is a statistic saying that 82% of the businesses which fall down, it is because of poor cash flow management. So on books, the business is profitable, but when it comes to a cash flow, they cannot continue their business because the lender will not going to give them any more money, and their clients, they are not paying them, and he cannot pay his staff or whatever is due on him, and then the whole thing will going to collapse and he have to declare the bankruptcy. But that is on the normal situation. So just imagine when you have a cash flow problems with, I would say, 80 or 90% of the stakeholders around the business, then that is the tough time where we have to find solution out of the box, not only just to wait for our money to come from our client. That is where we have to focus on. And there are many solutions, but the main issue that everyone trying to get his dues from his clients, and the subcontractors trying to get their monies from me, and then the whole chain is stopped. And there is a good say from Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Group. He said, never take your eye off the cash flow, because it is the lifeblood of the business. So that is how it is important. That is when we are talking about it in the normal life. So if you don't monitor it, you don't analyze, you don't understand how it's critical, and you have different scenarios to deal with it, and you have an emergency plan to recover from any deficiencies in there, you will not be able to survive on the business. And I think the situation of the COVID-19 have proven that those who they didn't have a plan, they suffered more, and those who had a plan, they managed to survive and will continue and will have the chance to recover. Many businesses have diminished because of that situation, because they have stayed 3 or 4 months out of business. They have to lay off their staff. They have to sell their assets, and still they are not covering their debt. So they have gone from the map. So we have to learn from this difficult lesson for the future, how to handle it. I think there are many lessons in there, but managing our financials during a crisis is one of the important things.
Some very good points. And so you think it should be a collaborated approach where everybody needs to get in together, not just from the interdepartmental side of it within the company, but also your supply chain, your clients, and from a very holistic view.
Of course,
yeah,
negotiating things during those situations, that is, I think, a key element on helping everyone, and not just to insisting in getting your rights and your full payments, but think of it all together, helping your client, helping your subcontractors, and making everybody survive that period.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Interesting that you made a reference to Richard Branson. I bet he's a bit upset about his current cash flow circumstances, but that's another session. We'll have to take that one offline. Thank you very much for that. Before I bring Indika back into the conversation, I just want to let the audience know you still do have time to send us some questions. We'll be taking some questions after this particular discussion point, so feel free to drop them in the chat box, and like I said, we'll try and get through as many as we can. Some of them I've had a look at, we have kind of covered in the conversation, so I'll just take some of the questions that we haven't actually touched upon. Right, Indika, please, your thoughts, please.
I think, Sarah, thanks to the organizers for having this balance of three different players in this discussion. We always link to each other, and I want to again link to what Badr said into three fundamentals. I think that drives into a solid financials that will keep the cash flow as well as ROI in the business. And those three, if I want to summarize it, that is top line growth versus bottom line growth. Which Dilip mentioned at very first beginning. We need to set the top line growth versus bottom line growth and strike a balance between these two. And if we strive a right balance between the two, and then we can win the game. And the second point is the profit versus cash flow. And these two are two different points which we need to distinguish: the top line versus bottom line, which is the revenue versus profit, and the profit versus cash flow. And I think it was Dilip who mentioned earlier that yes, if you have a very good profit or very good the top line or the bottom line, and then there is no cash in the business, that means the fundamentals are not working in that organization. And therefore, it's very important to strike a balance. And I may have revenue if I don't have cash falling to the company, and there is a gap there. The third point is these are very very famous words, and the famous wordings coming up in financial difficulties and during crisis. And we have witnessed this twice in the last decade, in 2008 as well as 2019 and 2020, which is the lean business models. I think we cannot ignore this principle, because this principle is really important, and in a financial crisis or a crisis situation, the lean business models with fundamentals, and that will allow you to sustain in a difficult situation like this. And without going into a detail, I will summarize few areas that within these three fundamentals, what business can drive. These are again no rocket science. We talk about the efficiencies, drive efficiencies, where we have to first identify the drivers, and then to do some studies, and then come up with areas where the efficiency drives can be implemented, and then prioritize spending. What is important at this point in time, and spending balance between marketing versus business development versus fundamentals or enhancing business growth. Where should I put money? And these are the things that we need to look into during a situation like this, and that will help us to preserve cash, and then that can be used at the right time for right areas of business. But last not the least, look for opportunities. all of these bring, and especially we being FM industry, we all know that how much of opportunities the current pandemic has created for the FM players, and then grab them and then monetize them, and that's very important, and then go out of the non-conventional or non-traditional way of revenue generation. And also very important, selective business growth. We have to grow selectively, and then if we don't think about growth during pandemic, when the pandemic is over, I understand that the Dilip mentioned that it will be a longer period, and it's a U shape, it's not a V shape. It is lasting for more than that what we think, but that means how long we wait. We have to look for the growth of business, and we have to identify the selective opportunities and then grow. And then when the pandemic is over, we are ready to go to the next phase of business. I think these are the few points which I would like to add to the Badr's point, and how we can add value and then strive in this type of difficult situations, and then and maintain our ROI and cash flows.
No, it's very interesting what you've said, and I mean, Dilip also mentioned it earlier on in terms of some of the initiatives, or some of the enforcement initiatives, should I say, that the government has provided in relation to service charge. As you're the finance guy amongst us, are you aware of any kind of support that's being provided by the government or any kind of financial institution to support the FM's kind of cash flow needs, if you like?
In different countries, it works in different way, and the UAE is heavily depending on the private sector. And then and also we also should understand that the private sector is mostly expatriate, and then mostly not local business lines. And what they do mostly is that they create the platforms, and rather than encouraging business, because in developing countries or the developed countries, we see that a lot of government interaction is happening during the financial crisis. But what UAE has done, I think Dilip mentioned that when it comes to the Mulak system, and then the support that was given, waiver of late payment fees for house owners to have some flexibility of the payments. At the same time, they open up the economy before anybody else, and then they make sure the economy is moving. And then this is how I see what the government or the has done to support these. I remember yesterday I overheard the conversation. Somebody said 23rd of March. My flight was ready to leave the country on 24th of March, and the hotel opened on 25th of March. We were called back into hotels. I mean, this is, just imagine the population that were set to leave the country, and then now that population is back in business. I think what we should value as citizens in this country is what the government has done, effort to make this economy is moving, make all the operational activities and make all elements of economy moving much faster speed than any other economies or any other cities around the world. That is how I see it, Sarah. I think that's where the every player, from the top player to the street seller today, is operating in the market within the pandemic. I think that's a fantastic thing for us, rather than looking from governments to do subsidies. Of course, there is initiatives of moratorium when it comes to financing facilities, which government is ensuring banks are supporting. But more than that, I think we should all be proud of the opening up of the economy at that fast pace.
Indeed, thank you very much, Indika. Let's bring Dilip in and get his thoughts on this, please.
Kara, I mean, the way I understand the question, you're saying how is the FM?
It's a bit of a long question. With growing cash flow concerns and a higher focus on return on investment in an increasingly competitive space, how can FM industry and building owners benefit and strive to progress?
So in brief, I understand that how the FM industry out of this challenge is going to progress. Is that what it is?
Basically, yes.
So I personally feel that companies who have kept the framework alive, kept the process alive, are going to do better going further. Us FM companies who have, I know of companies in the Middle East and UK they have done better this year as compared to last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what was the reason? The reason was that they were able to keep their process alive, the framework alive, and make sure the expenses under control, and they did it well. You know, so going further, I feel it is also a kind of emphasis to getting the process right within your companies, getting the process framework right within your companies. You know, getting those. I mean, I'm going a bit off way, but I think that's very critical to keep the process alive. And I'm going to kind of, I think Ms. Alabar made a comment about 2 or 3 months back on their HR process for EMA, where they are taking away positions and defining people with job descriptions. You know, one of the key challenges to processes with an organization is the baggage of positions, that I'm the CEO for the company, I'm the director for the company, I'm the general manager. While we built up these positions, we actually we built up a cumbersome hierarchy, yeah, and people get identified with those positions rather than getting identified with what work they are supposed to be doing. You know, so I think very critical to keep these, understand those bottlenecks and make it as part of the process. And technology has always been an important tool. Now you just can't do without it. I mean, you better do it, otherwise you're out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so technology is going to be life-sustaining. You know, I can tell you that. If we don't smarten up our businesses with technology, we are going to extinguish for sure. I'm convinced about that process. And second is, if we don't get out of these positions of hierarchies, I think we can't sustain our business. Yeah. Third, I think you know, FM is a great model, great industry. See, I mean, I can tell you, if you create FM companies, you can add great groups. You can add 80 other businesses on that company if you're able to do it. So I think we are into more smarter times. You know, we need to get more smarter. We need to get less egoistic about our businesses and move on. I can also see a lot of mergers, acquisitions happening. I know it's happening in the UK. I know it's going on a bit here as well. But come early 21s, you'll see mergers, M&As happening, you know, in the property industry altogether. So I think the industry will get more sharper, yeah, and it's going to be survival of the fittest. So
absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dilip, for your insights on the future of cash flow management in FM. I really enjoyed that. We're done with the discussion points, gents. I'm looking at the questions. We've actually answered all of the questions, interestingly enough, that's come in, which is a testament to how fascinating our discussion was and how sort of far-fetching it was. We covered a lot of points. There's an interesting statement here that's coming from, I believe it's Ibrahim. I just want to read it out. He says, cash flow should not be a problem. What you need to work is to identify revenue leakages and implement backfill strategies. Actions such as energy and sustainability accounting are very important in finding break-even point with clients, which kind of like very articulately sums up what we've all been discussing this afternoon. So I want to thank him for his comment. And thank all three of you gentlemen for your time today. Unfortunately, we've actually sadly come to the end of the session. And it's truly been an absolute pleasure moderating this panel discussion, and thank you to CM Today for inviting me to do so. I hope everyone watching has enjoyed it as much as I have. Please be sure to follow CM Today's website for the latest news, and their social media platforms for more on today's events and the overall Smart Built Environment Forum, whereby the details, of course, will be published, you know, and in due course. And on that note, I'd like to sincerely thank all the attendees and the participants, and thank you for your questions and your comments in the chat box. And of course, a huge thank you to the wonderful panelists, Badir, Indika, and Dilip, for sharing their expertise and knowledge on such a captivating subject. So with all that said, I would like to bid you all a very good rest of the day. Stay safe, stay well, all the best, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gents. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone.